Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. I'm just reading one of Jacobin's favorites. From everyone here at Jacobin, we want to wish you a happy New Year's. And we're glad that you're joining us tonight. It's mostly just going to be some of our friends, some of our comrades, to have a laugh, tell some stories, and make some unfortunate New Year's Eve resolutions and maybe some predictions for what's going to happen in the Biden administration. So please hit like, please hit subscribe, and hope you stick around.
Hi, Cale.
This is the dumbest thing I've ever done for Jacobin.
Happy New Year. Thank you for the PSA.
Happy New Year. I can hear there's some liberals partying outside in the East Village right now. They're having a good time. We're going to have some background ambient cheering throughout the night because it's the end of the worst year in human history, if you didn't know.
Yeah, I'm in Idaho right now, and there are a lot of fireworks, which are very legal here, going off everywhere. So I think my headphones or my mic should block it all out. But apologies in advance, and Happy New Year to everybody watching the stream right now, and every Jacobin reader.
Happy New Year. This is going to be just kind of something fun, just kind of answering questions, just kind of talk with our guests and some of the Jacobin contributors, regulars that you've probably seen on YouTube before or have hopefully read some of their writing. And yeah.
One quick thing. So we have a fun little drinking game for you. If you go to the YouTube description box, there are little items that you can check off if you want to drink along. And yeah, with that, Cale's pouring himself his bubbly.
Well, Jen, what are our drinking game items?
What are our drinking game items? So they're in the description box. I know that one of them is a Bernie shirt. So you can go ahead and raise your glass to Bernie 2020. I think we're going to have Vivek Chibber on later. And I think if he disparages the left, that's another drink. What else is in there? If anybody says, not counting this, if anybody says either identity politics or class reductionist,
take a drink.
I think you can also take a drink. And there's other stuff in there. So
if Bhaskar brings up basketball,
definitely drink. We'll be looking at questions in the live chat. So when our guests come on, if you have a burning question for them, drop it in there and we'll try to bring that up.
Speaking of which, we can bring in some people
joining us.
Yeah, joining us is Jacobin staff writer, Branko Marcetic. Probably fucked that up, but Branko and then Matt Chrisman from Chapo Trapos. How's it going, guys?
Hey, guys.
Happy New Year.
Hey. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So we'll just, I don't know, kick things off. I was saying to Cale before this all started that I had kind of a burning question that I wanted to ask literally every guest that comes on here. And Branko, since you're here, you're actually like one of the most perfect people I can think of to ask this. So first of all, I was wondering if you guys, and fess up, if you thought Biden was going to win in a landslide, or at least by a much larger margin than he did. And Branko, you're the resident Bidenologist, so you go first.
Yeah, I mean, you would think, given the conditions of the election, I mean, it was, unemployment was pretty terrible by that point. It was like a little lower than it was in, I think, 2008, but on par. And then also you had a pandemic that had killed at that point. Was it up to 300,000 at that point? It was at least approaching that. So, given all the chaos that was going on, Trump was this uniquely unpopular president through basically his entire run. You would have thought this would have been a
blowout,
massacre,
right?
of the. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and if you look at at other elections, other recession era elections, which didn't have a deadly pandemic, let alone a buffoonish president who sort of who caught the virus out of his own stupidity. All of those were massive defeats for the party in power. And which 1932. You can also go back to 1920, and you can look at 1980 as well. Biden's margin of victory was way less than all of those. I mean, I think in the end, Biden won by I think 4.5%. Reagan had won by I think 7 or 9 points, and that was in a year where there was actually a third party candidate that sucked up a decent amount of votes.
Yeah. The other thing I think is the polling, right? Like, I mean, we shouldn't have been fooled after 2016, but the refrain this year was like, oh, we fixed the polls. Like we have adjusted, so the polls are correct again. And they were off by like massive margins, especially in the Midwest. I think I remember like there was I think it was like the New York Times average of the polls leading up to the election showed Biden ahead by like 10 points in Wisconsin, Matt. And like, I think he squeaked by with like less than 1% or something, right? So I don't know, Matt, did you think Biden was going to win in a blowout?
I thought he would win by more than he did, just because I thought there's the polls. And I felt one election was not enough to just discard the whole thing and just assume the Thunderdome, or more specifically, I didn't think you could assume that if the polls are wrong, they're going to always be wrong in the same way. One of the big problems with people extrapolating from polls is because the sample size is actually microscopic. Whenever you're talking about presidential polling, because we don't get a presidential election every 4 years. So I was like, well, I don't really know. Here's this polling, which all says one thing. I'm just going to assume it's right. I'm not betting on it, so it doesn't really matter. So I was definitely surprised. But I feel like now, I guess, now I feel pretty confident in the future that I'm just going to completely ignore those.
Yeah.
But hopefully the thing to take from it is less, the polls are wrong and it means it's counterindicative. It should just be, why does it matter? Unless you're putting money on it, it doesn't matter. Why is prognosticating and wondering how the outcome is going to be matter? I understand people want to make a case for their politics, but once the candidates are chosen, there's really nothing you can do. Like, wait for the freaking results, and then you can talk about something. So that's something I definitely learned from this is just, unless you actually have people having voted and something you can point to, you don't have anything.
Yeah. So I have to admit, in 2016, I did think Hillary was going to win, right? But then when the blue wall states kind of fell, then it seemed really obvious that, what had happened, because those states hadn't voted for Hillary in the primary, right? So then that was kind of like the kernel of the Bernie would have won argument. And it seemed really clear why she had lost. But this year, Biden won all those states, all the blue wall states in the primaries. And of course, he, eked out a victory eventually, but again, by such slim margins that I admit I was way more shell-shocked this time around than even in 2016.
Well, I mean, the reason Biden won in the Democratic primary was completely different to the conditions of the general election, because he was having to, and Sanders as well, they were having to compete for this particular demographic of voters who had these, very specific pathologies that they had to basically overcome. Biden played to that because Biden said, I know that the only thing you care about is getting rid of Trump, and that's all I'm going to promise you, basically, nothing else. Right. I will get rid of Trump. Look at the polls. I'm the strongest candidate. Sanders, unfortunately, could have ran the same campaign he did in 2016. It was focused on the issues, and people were obviously fired up about that as well. But I mean, if you look at poll after poll after poll of poll, surveys of people, they said Democratic voters, getting rid of Trump was their main priority. Unfortunately, in the general election, that was not the main priority of every single voter. I mean, there were certainly very hard anti-Trump partisans who made up the general election electorate, but most people are voting because they're thinking about, is this going to make my life better? Is this going to make my kids' life better? And for some people, Trump's economic argument happened to fill that space, I guess.
Yeah. So Luke, welcome, and over to you. Did you think Biden was going to win in a landslide?
I wasn't. The result, I think, basically mirrored what I expected. I mean, something I learned from 2016, and I think I kind of relearned this time, is that we all just kind of need to trust our instincts. I think in 2016, a lot of us on the left felt like Hillary Clinton was a very poor general election candidate. And I think watching the DNC that year, I think a lot of us kind of, I mean, for me, certainly, I remember watching that and thinking, God, they really could blow this thing. But then sometime later in the fall, I think we all got kind of talked into, we were so bombarded with polling and, so kind of hectored by the Nate Silvers of the world into believing that a Democratic victory was inevitable. We all kind of said, well, Hillary's probably going to win. And I think there was a similar phenomenon this year with Biden, where, I mean, in the days leading up to, I mean, it's already been forgotten, but do you guys remember in the days leading up to the election, all that talk about the Democrats flipping Texas, that there seems to be every single election now?
So annoying.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing is that the thing that made me take that a little more seriously than the past was the early surge in voter turnout. And that is because I was assuming, like a lot of people did, that greater turnout helps Democrats. The people who don't generally vote are people who, by and large, would vote Democratic if they did. And that is why the GOP does such a good job of trying to reduce the number of people who vote. And seeing all those people vote, you think, well, Texas is basically California demographically. If more people are voting, they might really have a chance. And what this election, I think, really showed is, even the incoherent, culture war Republican message of Trump is going to have appeal to people who are in traditional democratic demographics. And that really, to me, spells long-term death for the Democrats. They're doomed. I think they're going to go from the point where Ruth Bader Ginsburg could hold on to her seat, even though she weighed 75 pounds and was mostly tumors, because she was completely confident that Democrats would retain the presidency forever, to a point where yes, of course, the anti-democratic electoral college is part of that, but that's built in. Like, you can't assume that away. They're going to have a hard time holding on to the presidency at all. And I think Biden is basically guaranteed one-termer at this point. I mean, we'll see what happens, but it's hard to imagine them being able to have any kind of positive argument for themselves after what is most likely going to be 4 years of austerity and hunger chancellorship.
Yeah, I think a really interesting thing about the kind of demographic issues that you were just talking about is how we saw more non-white voters than ever before flip to Trump. And again, I've said this, on the Jacobin channel before, don't get me wrong, the majority of non-white voters, Black voters, Latino voters, Asian American voters still voted for Biden. So it wasn't like whole groups flipped to Trump, but we see significant shifts in not just the early exit polling, but at this point, precinct level data that shows that in major cities, you see immigrant enclaves, Latino and Asian American neighborhoods and Black neighborhoods where there is a significant chunk of the electorate that shifted to Trump. And, I think that's something that honestly, there's been stuff in the New York Times about it, but I don't think that a lot of the liberal commentariat is comfortable with this, wants to talk about it. I think that it's really significant, though. And I think that, as you said, it is going to be the death of the Democratic Party. I mean, maybe not in and of itself, but just one part of a larger implosion over the next few years.
It's going to be a hard sell to people in a background of, worsening economic conditions for every American, when your main and almost only electoral pitch is one of manners and politeness overall. You'll be essentially telling people, yes, your life is worse than it's ever been, but the only thing that politics is about enforcing a standard of politeness in public discord. And I don't think that's going to have a dwindling appeal to anybody who is not very materially secure.
Right.
And over the last 40 years, the hollowing out of democratic institutions, of associational organizations, trade unions, community groups, civic society in general, what's left is so very ephemeral that it's hard to predict. I think it's hard to predict what someone's going to end up deciding to vote on. That the exit polls are saying it's economic issues, that overwhelmingly, whether it's exit polls or opinion polling more broadly, that people are crying out that we need some kind of economic stimulus. We need universal health care. We need wages to rise. And then when the parties don't provide that, it's all of these other weird little idiosyncratic issues that end up driving people to say, I'm going to go with this person over this other person. And so
since Harvey has just joined, hello,
Happy New Year,
Happy New Year. A question for you. Why do you think so many non-white voters shifted to Trump this election? Was it just the stimulus check?
I wouldn't reduce it to that. I actually think that the continuing recovery before the pandemic lined them up in support of Trump. I hate to reduce it to the simple dollar question, but I think that's what happened. And so the pandemic struck, and they were probably were incapable of imagining the Democrats doing anything different, because the Democrats were literally marginal to the whole affair anyhow. And even when Biden started running, he never really he lamented, but he didn't really tell you what it would mean for a Democrat to be in office to address the pandemic. In fact, even now, I have no idea.
He would do the same thing that Trump would do, only more politely, more competently, I guess, but not even really competence was the emphasis so much as more sensitively. But there was no alternative. There was no alternative to the model of stingy, very stingy public provision of stimulus and people having to work in the middle of a pandemic to keep shelter. And that's it. And maybe there'll be a vaccine, but I mean, there'd be a vaccine no matter who's in charge.
Right. By the way, can you all hear me okay? Okay, good. Because by the way, Jen, it was interesting what you were saying a little while ago, and because I was thinking to myself, well, when it came out, the fact that there was this tremendous turnout for Trump, the fact that the working class actually did not turn away from Trump, and one mentions this on Twitter, and immediately people jump on you as you're a racist because you're only talking about the white working class. And then when you point out that in fact Latinos and African Americans, though again, as you said, not radically so, but definitely there was this move towards the Trump presidency or the Trump campaign. They don't even want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to hear it. That it isn't really true, kind of thing.
Right. Well, it's every demographic but white men that move towards Trump.
Yeah.
I would just add to this that I think we should take seriously the idea that as inadequate as the entire pandemic response was in the United States, and as shambolic and disorganized and ineffective as Trump's governance was in dealing with it, in many ways he went a lot further than previous presidents. Like if you look at the scope of the use of presidential power in the United States, yes, it's been used to murder and kidnap people overseas, but when it comes to actually protecting people from economic harm in the United States, it's sort of been very stingy. And so in the context of that, Trump doing something like signing an eviction moratorium that, had these massive loopholes that were exploited and nonetheless left people in pretty bad conditions, but nonetheless was an eviction moratorium. And he did it a month after, Biden, his rival, came out and called for an emergency housing package, did not mention an eviction moratorium at all. He mentioned, giving people subsidies to pay for health insurance and making sure they had access to food programs. So, Trump outflanked Biden on that respect. He signed things like the order to make sure that people with COVID health issues would be covered. They didn't have to pay for it, if they went for emergency care. He diverted money from the FEMA fund to pay out unemployment insurance and a whole host of other things. Things that, again, on the whole, given the scope of the pandemic, not adequate at all. But, Obama refused to do a foreclosure moratorium. He declined to pursue that. Of course, Trump didn't either, but, he went a step closer to that than certainly Obama did. And I think for a lot of people who haven't seen the president really take any sort of drastic executive action to really come to their aid in the crisis, people are probably like, oh, actually, this is not that bad. And one other thing I'll also say, I was looking back through the campaign. Biden refused to come out for the stimulus payments, the direct payments. He never took that issue up. Through the last months of the campaign, it was Trump who, completely just lip service and nothing behind it. But nonetheless, he was the one who was saying, we have to get checks into people's hands. Let's get these stimulus checks done. Biden refused to have anything to do with it when Kamala Harris, who joined his campaign, who had co-sponsored Sanders legislation to give everyone $2,000. When she joined, clearly they told her, don't ever mention this again. We don't want you talking about this. And she just stopped advocating for the policy. So, there is a certain element of it where Trump did, because of the inadequacy of Biden, kind of outflank him in some of these economic positions. And I think we should, we shouldn't pretend that isn't the case.
Guys, I'm going to say goodbye. I want to wish everybody a happy new year. Let's hope that they take the cartridge of 2020 out and blow in it again. Am I right, folks? All right.
Thank you, Matt. Good to see you.
Take care.
Happy New Year.
Well, actually, as Matt's jumping out.
Can I just say something since
well, hold on, Harvey. I'm going to introduce a guest because we're also joined by New York State Senator Julia Salazar. Happy New Year.
Oh. Hey, welcome. Happy New Year.
Can you all hear me? Okay,
kind of.
excellent.
It's a little fish tanky. It sounds like you're underwater.
I'll fix that. It's my headphones.
Okay.
Bear with me.
But Harvey, you were saying?
Well, I was going to say, since while I know of all of you and I've maybe even exchanged notes with some of you, I do want to say it was an absolute pleasure to see all of you, for the first time. And I'll just say that I've always enjoyed Luke's stuff, even when I've taken issue with it. And Bronco, I think your book on Biden was fantastic. Okay. I read it all the way through. It was very useful to me. And when I was doing shows, I didn't always give you credit for what I said, but I do want to thank you. Okay. And indeed, I think you guys do great work. And I think, in fact, I'm only here because I had wanted to meet you guys. I told Cale I felt a little funny given I didn't really quite feel like I was a Jacobin member of the Jacobin crew, but he said, "Oh no, you got to." And I thought, well, I got to meet these people, so I should.
You're definitely a member of the Jacobin crew.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
We always appreciate your insights, Harvey. Thanks for coming on. Julia, can we hear you now?
I hope so. Can you hear me now? You may also hear my neighbor's music or something because I don't have headphones, but
no, you're good.
Yeah,
so before you hopped on, we were just kind of going over the 2020 election now that we've obviously had a little bit of distance to reflect on whether we thought Biden was going to win in a landslide or why so many non-white voters actually shifted to Trump. But since you are a policymaker yourself, what is coming up in the next year in the New York State Senate?
Yeah, well, we definitely have our work cut out for us because 2020, when I reflect on this year, I feel frankly sort of ashamed of the lack of action that was taken at the state level. In Albany, our leadership typically just passed the buck to the federal government and said we're going to wait on an additional stimulus package and then those funds can be used to provide relief in New York rather than finally just having the political courage to tax the very wealthy in our state, to tax the rich and to generate revenue in order to meet the fiscal impact of canceling rent and mortgage payments and trying to feed people and even pay people to stay home and make sure that small businesses stay open. So our work is really cut out for us. We just passed on Monday an expanded and extended eviction moratorium as a moratorium on foreclosure proceedings and on tax liens, which is going to be really important to people, but is only going, it has a sunset of May 1st. And so we really, my hope is that that relatively short timeline lights a fire under the asses of state lawmakers in New York to actually act decisively to raise revenue in a variety of ways. And first and foremost taxing millionaires and billionaires in our state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, in many ways, hopefully New York will kind of be the test case for things to come in the future as democratic socialists continue to be elected across the country and really kind of test the limits of, how much can we get through our slates and how much legwork do we need to do to actually get these policies over the finish line. And so, glad that we can figure this out in New York, because, greatest frickin' city in the world.
I have a question for all of you. What do you think? How do you think Medicare for All might move forward, if at all, this year? I guess, Julia, is there? There's kind of always a plan to try to do something like that in New York that never really seems to get across the finish line, right? And then for the rest of you, I'm wondering what you think might happen on a national level. What is I don't really even understand what Biden's public option is, so it kind of seems like he doesn't either. So,
yeah. The public option, I don't think. Obama kind of vaguely campaigned on a public option or inferred that one was going to be on the table 12 years ago, and it was never really discussed, from what I can remember. And I mean, similarly, Biden talked about the public option a lot in the primaries, but I think the primary function of that was just so that he had something to counter the push for Medicare for All that Sanders was leading. I haven't looked at all of them, but I'd venture a guess that if you watched all of Biden's general election ads, he probably doesn't talk about the public option in any of them. Right. Speaks to a more generalized phenomenon you see in Democratic campaigns, which is, Democrats are always running on the quote unquote most progressive platform ever, but then, it's usually just something that exists on a website and they don't actually talk about it. In Biden's debates with Trump, I don't think he talked about the public option at all. And even if the Democrats win these Senate runoffs in Georgia, I would be very surprised if I would honestly be surprised if there were even a perfunctory nod to the public option. I just don't think that Biden has ever been all that serious about most of the things that are nominally on his campaign website that he was supposedly campaigning on. You're not trying to bring in a public option when you're taking advice from people like Larry Summers and when you're raising the kinds of money from the kinds of donors that he was, and presumably making all kinds of grotesque promises to them, behind the scenes and, sometimes in public. So I am not super optimistic about Medicare for All in the new year, although I do think that if nothing else, 2021 should be immensely clarifying about where a lot of centrist Democrats actually stand on healthcare reform.
Yeah, I would say that Medicare for All is not going to happen in the next 2 years at least, if not longer. But now would be the time, and hopefully will be the time, that there will be an organized, pressure movement from the bottom up to put this on the agenda. Obviously, there's a whole discussion about force to vote. That's a fine strategy, but also has to come from the bottom. And I mean, you have to have the same ferocity where people are challenging these rank and file centrist Democrats in the same way that the Tea Party, was yelling at Democrats over Obamacare and healthcare reform in 2009, 2010. And some of that is happening. I mean, these centrist Democrats that blame Medicare for All on why everyone underperformed, the party underperformed. Actually, people like Connor Lamb were being pressured at town halls and meetings with their constituents, but they were being pressured to adopt Medicare for All. So they were actually, it wasn't that they were getting pushback from their constituents saying, why does your party support this extremist policy? They were actually saying, why aren't you supporting this? This is life-saving stuff.
Yeah, and I think Bernie pointed out that every candidate who ran on Medicare for All or who supported Medicare for All won against their Republican opponents. So that particular argument doesn't hold water.
Yeah, there was a lot of, there were definitely people who supported Medicare for All who lost. One factor in that is the fact that the standard bearer of the Democratic Party did not support Medicare for All. Mm-hmm. And it led to this kind of conflicting messaging. There were people, Kara Eastman, for example, in Nebraska, and there were others who were running on Medicare for All. And actually, Republicans used Biden's anti-Medicare for All talking points in ads against them. So I mean, there's a we will never be able to know for sure, but I mean, there is a big question to be asked about how much would it have changed if you had someone, someone like Sanders at the top of the ticket who actually supported this and actually could make a case for it, not just not make an anti-case, but actually, an articulate and clarifying and sort of easily understandable way explain to people why this was a good policy and why you should support it. We'll never know, but hopefully that day will come. The last thing I'll say, and then I'm gonna have to get out of here. But when it comes to Medicare, I mean, this is a fight that took a long time in the first place. I mean, Medicare initially, I think, was proposed in 1958. That was the first time it came onto the legislative agenda, and it took 7 years. A lot of grassroots action, a lot of stuff that was happening in Congress as well. So this is not going to be overnight, but that's part of the process. It has to be this battle. Anyway, I will wish everyone a happy New Year's. You've made it this far. It's been 9 months. It's been a terrible, terrible year. But if we made it this far, I think we can. We've all gotten a new resilience that we didn't have before, and I think that is something to celebrate in this very bleak year. So I just want to wish everyone a happy New Year and
happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you, Bronco. Talk to you later.
Cheers.
So Julia, to go back to you for a quick second, somebody had a really good question in the chat. They wanted to know, what does a state level campaign for Medicare for All look like? Because Medicare for All, like in theory, or like as we want to see it, would be a federal program, right? But what does it mean to adopt single payer on like a state level?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, any push at the state level for Medicare for All, for single payer, is going to be in collaboration with the fight to establish Medicare for All at the federal level, and that's what we see in New York. In New York, we have proposed legislation, the New York Health Act, which I'm a co-sponsor of. Senator Gustavo Rivera is the lead sponsor in the state Senate, and it also comes back to the fiscal impact of it, which is, of course, the biggest obstacle at the federal level as well. All of us who support Medicare for All and universal health care know that there's a savings over time, right? That it's actually it is much more responsible for us to have, by any metric really, for us to have universal health care than to not to, or rather to continue the system that exists. But yeah, I mean, what it really looks like is people organizing in tandem with the organizing at the federal level. And in terms of the question of like it's always difficult for me to try to predict when could we see Medicare for All in New York or in the U.S. In New York, our biggest challenge is the governor, who naturally does not support it, is truly a fiscal conservative, and therefore doesn't support Medicare for All, or the New York Health Act. But what we know is that it's going to take a lot of organizing and political education, and also I think, like, as socialists, we really want the labor movement to completely support single payer and Medicare for All, and I'm not I'm not certain that we're there yet, even though a lot of progress has been made in building a coalition of labor in the U.S. that supports it. So that's what I think is the immediate task.
Right.
I have a kind of tangential, but I think related question for you, Harvey.
I just wanted to say one thing as a sidebar to Julia. So my assumption is he won't be governor of New York next year.
I hope you're right.
I mean, if we want him as Attorney General, that's the key.
Right. That's the other question.
Sorry, Jen. I just want.
No. That's a great question. I think all of us in New York are kind of hoping that will be the case.
And I'll just point out that I grew up in the New York area. I still think of myself as sort of pretty much a New Yorker, but out here for so many years that it's hard to make that claim. But I'll also add that just for the record, I want to go on record. My daughter is an assistant attorney general of the state of New York, who's been fighting the Trump initiatives. She's on they called it this sort of special team to combat the Trump initiatives out of the attorney general's office. So I do try to stay on top of New York politics, and I keep asking people, what do you think? Will he be the Attorney General of the United States? I think he will, because the political scene has changed in New York, right? As a consequence of is something called IDC. Am I anywhere near right?
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Julia knows all about it.
Yeah. And I think the 10-second synopsis of it, right, is the Independent Democratic Conference was this group of technically Democratic Party state senators who caucused with Republicans in the state Senate in order to create a de facto Republican majority, Republican control in the state Senate. And that way, we wouldn't actually have, for years, we did not actually have a Democratic state Senate, Assembly, and executive. And that was advantageous to the governor, who really didn't want to have to sign bills that a Democratic state Assembly and state Senate passed. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Sorry. Good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
dynamic change in 2018.
Right, and on Julia's point a moment earlier of wanting to get labor on board with single payer and universal health care, people should know that the labor campaign for single payer is having a conference in January that we're not sponsored or anything, but there's a link online that you should click on and perhaps attend if you have some time in January. I don't remember the exact dates. It's like mid to late January. But that is really, I think, a central part of kind of our push forward for Medicare for all and for any kind of universal health care. It's making those connections, doing our part to try to help make those connections between the political left and the labor movement, and to actual union members in this country that right now are not on board with single payer, and we have to be the ones, and their brothers and sisters in their unions have to be the ones to have those conversations and make the pitch that actually we have so much more to gain by universal healthcare than a particular union healthcare plan. I wanted to also introduce David Griscom from the new show Left Reckoning, new podcast,
Hey.
Yeah. How's it going, David?
Hey, not too bad. How's everyone doing tonight? I'm in good company.
Yeah, we're all good. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Well, David and I go back a few years by way of Michael. So
yeah, for sure. It's great to see you, Harvey.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, great to see all you too. You too, Julia. And Luca, I've never met you before, but I'm a big fan of your work.
Yeah, likewise. Hey.
So just to jump back to you, Harvey, for a second, something that I wanted to ask you is you are a historian of the New Deal, among other things. And we've heard from Biden and some of his surrogates that his platform or his policies are going to be the most progressive since the New Deal. I'm assuming you're a little skeptical about that, but what I actually wanted to ask you is what is something that leftists should take away from the New Deal? Like, is there something that we can learn from a kind of like lesser known aspect of the New Deal that we should be paying attention to?
Okay, well, I'll answer that question, and then I want to add to your question. The first thing to take away is that FDR was eager to pursue a New Deal. Okay, that's the starting place. Okay, he didn't. And he wanted to be pushed as far as he could go, and the reason was that he knew of he had Southern opposition, what later became the Dixiecrats. He knew he had that opposition. They were not opposed to taking money in the South, but it could not be tied to anything that would desegregate the South. So he had to constantly work around that problem. And the other thing is that Republicans in the North, though there were once upon a time progressive Republicans, and even then in the 30s, most were very, very hostile to anything. So when you put together the possibility of this conservative coalition, he wanted to be pushed, and labor was the force that would push him. And he actually garnered labor support and regularly invited them. Sorry, am I shouting into my thing? It's the old habit of lecturing to big class.
You sound great, Harvey.
Okay, thanks. So the main thing to remember is that when anyone says to you, we have to, push Biden, we have to get labor to push Biden, it is true, but we shouldn't be naive to expect that Biden is anything like FDR. I think that's the first reality. But I also want to say that, if I could just step quickly to something in that vein, is that Biden isn't going to go anywhere near Medicare for all. We know that he's not going to declare, an end to student debt. He may not even do it for $10,000 a year. It's probably not going to happen. But the one thing that he might well want to pursue of a New Deal form is some kind of he might well be encouraged by folks to go after a massive infrastructure program. And that could be, if the left could get it together in a broad kind of unified way, that could be a lever to really make things happen. So and I've seen a lot of really good plans as to how to make the idea of an infrastructure thing work. They can do it even without the Senate, but even if they could just peel away a few votes from Republicans, the caucus, they might well be able to initiate some massive public. Now, here's the thing. He has to be prepared to use the executive order to do three things. Number one, to set at least a $15 minimum wage for all federal contracts for infrastructure. Two, he has to use the executive order to say that there will be healthcare coverage for everyone who works for a company that gets that kind of contract. And the third one is that they have to be guaranteed collective bargaining rights. So we should. So the trick is, instead of going after the impossible, which we have to keep on the agenda, we really have to be ready to make sure that if they go in that direction, they include those three initiatives. And the reason that's important is, number one, it will open the door to the discussion of all of the things we do want. So, okay.
Well, so just
David,
on that, yeah. So actually, yeah, I was going to throw it to David too. We're both throwing it to David, so we can sync it up together of Jen and I throwing to David. Because David, what are socialist possibilities in rural America and in red states? Like Harvey's talking about the possibilities of building out infrastructure. What kind of fights should the left be pursuing in these parts of the country right now?
Well,
I don't know if that was the same question.
Or do you think the left is going to get anything other than infrastructure, if that, from Biden?
Well, the Biden one I might have to put on the back burner because I agree with all the optimism of Harvey, but I have I'm a little from Biden that has shown me that he's going to be doing very much different from the typical Democratic Party playbook. I think we have to play offense as much as possible and be bold as possible, which is the same kind of push that I would talk about when it talks to red states or rural America. I think like the biggest thing that socialists have to learn about this part of the country, right, especially like the South where I'm from, is that you got to be bold. And what you've seen from the Democratic Party in that region has just been cowardly politicians. And this most recent election in 2020 was a disaster for the Democrats. And it was a disaster for the Democrats, not just in the traditional kind of like red bastions, but it was a disaster even for, Latino communities in South Texas where they should have just walked away with it. And it should be noted again, because I don't want anyone to get the wrong impression, Biden won those districts by a large margin. But he lost just between like 2016 and 2020. He was basically, Trump was able to gain like 30 points on what Hillary Clinton was able to get there, which is disgusting. And why do you get that? You get that when you have a Democratic Party that has really made this pivot in the past few years to the suburbs and trying to talk about respectability politics. This kind of, Trump's a problem because, he's loud and oafish and all this kind of stuff. When all of these people, especially in Texas, were really suffering under quarantine, and then a state government was just refusing to do anything for people, right? You mix those two things together, that's a cocktail for disaster. And if the Democratic Party not being able to walk into those communities and say, not only, do we think that we're going to be able to provide you a better economic situation than Donald Trump in the immediate future, we're going to give you checks, we're going to take care of you, we're going to help you get through this quarantine situation, it's a disaster. And it's really frustrating, especially in those communities too, because what we saw after 2020 was all these activists, people who live in those communities saying, we've been on the phone with the state party office. Like, you need to start showing up in these communities because the Republicans are making a play for them. I think like the big lesson when it comes to, red states and rural America is just be bold. Like think about a state like Idaho, like my good professor, Luke Mayville, who actually introduced me to Michael Brooks a few years ago. And that's how this whole journey started for me. Went back to Idaho and was able to pass Medicaid expansion there through ballot initiative. And the way that he did that is he just went to poor working class communities and he said, do you think that people should have Medicaid? If they, do you think that we should expand Medicaid to include more people? And everybody's like, yes. They might vote for Republicans in the general election, but they understood that kind of policy. And having that kind of strategy, understanding that most working class people, most working class communities understand the material benefits of programs like Medicaid, understand the material benefits of things like higher minimum wage, stuff like that. That's a deep well that we should be tapping into, that state Democratic parties across the country just haven't been for a really long time.
David, I just want to jump on that really quick because I'm from Idaho and I'm actually here right now. You're right. The Medicaid expansion that was passed by ballot initiative is a really interesting sort of case study for a deep red state and how, these bread and butter issues or like these universal or, near universal policies that are to help the working class actually do really well. But as you probably know, in Idaho, one problem is that even though the voters passed the ballot initiative, the state level Republicans are trying to scale back on the Medicaid expansion by attaching all of these waivers like work requirements and basically just different measures to kind of shrink the expansion. So I guess the question is like, how do we get around Republicans?
we're not going to be able to get around Republicans until we just really have a viable political organization or party, or at least if the Democratic Party just starts to dig in. It's just like, across the country. That's why I'm quite bold in this statement where like a lot of people, a lot of progressives, a lot of socialists are really fixated. And first of all, like, there's a piece of advice or line Ronan Burtonshaw, our friend at Tribune Magazine, said once when he was on TMBS that I love so much. He said, the job of socialists today is to convince working class people that politics can change their lives, right? And that's it, right? That's exactly the moment that we're in right now. Is like people are going through political depression. They don't think that things can get better. And we have to start showing them that they can win. Winning a ballot initiative is an example of that. And the problem then is if you don't have a Democratic Party that is willing to sort of hold up that mantle and say, this is a question of democracy right now. You were asked this question and you voted one way and the Republican Party is refusing to accept that Democratic mandate, right? You need to have a party that has that kind of position. And the problem right now is these state Democratic parties, for the most part, don't have an interest in playing that role, which is a huge missed opportunity. So I don't have like one silver bullet to deal with that, but like the only way that we're going to do that is to start, one, being bold and knowing that we can win anywhere. We just need to start building these political organizations that have the strength to exist from campaign to campaign. Because the problem right now, and this is what we're learning post-Bernie, is we have this incredible moment where all these people came together, and now without Bernie, you're seeing all this fragmentation and difficulty right now because we need to have a space where we're all sort of living and cohabitating together and thinking and acting. We can't just rebuild political constituencies every election. It's going to be a disaster.
Can I just respond to that?
I wanted to give Luke one more thought on this because he's got to run out, and then we're going to bring in another guest. We're just rouletting all of our Jacobin people all night long.
I just don't want to miss out on Julia being here with what I have to say. Oh, I want Luke to go. Sorry, I'm not going.
Oh, okay, Luke, sorry.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I do have to go in a minute, unfortunately, but I wanted to get a point in. It's a little further back in the conversation, but on this whole kind of Biden and the New Deal business. I mean, I very much liked what Harvey said about, FDR wanted to be pushed. I think it's a really important point that people need to really keep in front of mind in relation to Biden, because I've been following the whole Biden is FDR thing since it started, which I think was soon after the end of the primaries. And there was a whole kind of push to kind of tell frustrated activists and people were disappointed that the most conservative candidate imaginable won the primaries, that don't worry, you're not going to get everything you want, but Biden is planning an FDR-sized presidency. That was the phrase that was used in a New York Times article that still makes the rounds today. And a number of liberal pundits kind of took up that narrative. But as far as I can tell, that's only ever been a media narrative, the idea of Biden being a kind of FDR-like figure. I mean, what Democrat doesn't want to get comparisons to FDR? I mean, to me, comparisons to FDR or Democrats kind of comparing themselves to FDR, presidential candidates, it's very similar to Democrat Democrats comparing themselves to JFK. You know, FDR is sort of an idiom that's there in the popular imagination, and they want to draw on it. But often, it's not a relationship that it's not a programmatic kind of thing. It's more about just like the vague idea of being transformative or something like that. And I think Biden as FDR has mostly been a kind of media phenomenon. And for the left thinking about how it should maneuver during a Biden presidency and how it should devise strategy, I think we should begin from the premise that Biden doesn't actually, unlike FDR, as Harvey rightly said, FDR wanted to be pushed. Biden doesn't want to be pushed. He doesn't want to think about the left. He doesn't want to acknowledge the left. And so I think everything should begin from that premise. There's lots that Biden could do by executive order. We know already, and he's told us he doesn't want to. So that needs to be our premise going forward. Anyway, I really would love to stay and chat, but it's wonderful to see you all. I'm glad to have dropped in from Toronto. I do have health insurance, but I wish you all luck. I hope to do everything I can in the next year to help you all get health insurance too. And for now, I'll just say a happy new year and cheers very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year. And because we've never met, I wanted to say that I'm a big fan of Michael and Us. So it's a great podcast that Luke does that people should listen to.
Well, thanks, Cale. Cheers, everyone. Good night.
Happy New Year.
Yeah. So I wanted to respond to David, but it's linked to Julia. Okay.
And before you do that, Harvey,
yeah?
I'm just gonna intro our other guest who's coming on right now, who's Alex Gorovich, professor at Brown University, I believe. And how's it going, Alex? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, sure. I don't even have anything. Sorry, I'm simply surrounded by my daughter's various. I think I can do a cosmonaut, or I think I can do fabulous Bjorn Borg or something like that.
There you go.
I've been basically spending the last 9 months dressed up in varieties of my daughter's.
Well, we'll ask the chat to assemble your outfit. They'll pick the pieces that you should be wearing tonight. So
we have a lot. What's left of my dignity is done. So have at it.
By 2020.
Nice to see everybody. Yeah. Happy 2020.
Yeah.
Harvey, did you want to finish that?
First I want to say that I actually think David's more optimistic than I am based on what he said. Okay. I always like people to say, well, the socialists have to do this and that. And as soon as you say that, I'm convinced that person's more optimistic than my socialist perspective. Okay. But what I want to say, and this connects now, is I think that your optimism is very operational, we can act on it. And I'm going to say very clearly that I think we need to elect more state assembly people in every state. And and that's the ripest place to start. Okay. And I say that in part because we've just elected, a brand new state assembly person from my district, which is generally Democratic district in a decidedly Republican state these days. But she is decidedly progressive. And I can tell you that I expect really significant things in this respect. Where Republicans rule, and they're going to rule for a while, the fact is that Democrats really do need to sound like FDR. They really do need to go big rhetorically. Okay. And in fact, because that's the only way to capture the public imagination and the public debate. But I also want to say, Julia, that there are a number of state assembly and Senate people around the country. Okay. I mean, from out in the West down to Missouri and elsewhere, and all their diversity, who have spoken to me over the last several years. And I keep saying to them, I know you're isolated, but there really does need to be a national association of progressive or social democratic or whatever state assembly people and state senators, because the more of the greater the presence, the greater the Democrats cannot ignore us.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that we have to organize among legislators, especially as more socialists are being elected. Not to say that and actually I don't know who your new state assembly person is.
I'll give you the name so you'll hear it later. Christina Shelton.
Excellent, Christina Shelton. So she very well could be, it sounds like is someone who identifies as progressive and also supports essentially the same policy agenda that I would support.
I have little doubt.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so what exists currently is like local progress, which is a really, we'll say, like a really big tent of state and local, city council members, I think, too, local legislators across the country, and then the Democratic Socialists of America, of course, is building out this like DSA in office network of of legislators as more and more socialists are being elected, and I think it's something that hasn't been utilized enough yet to build power that way, because that's really I'm biased, right, because it's like my job and I just live and breathe this all the time, but I do believe that this is immediately the way for us to have a material impact on people's lives by passing state legislation.
Right. Thank you. I just wanted to make the
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alex, I wanted to pull you in because something that we hear sometimes on the left, increasingly we've been hearing this on the left of the last few months, is both the importance of striking generally, but people have talked about something called a general strike. And I'm sure you've written about this before. You've written a lot about the importance of strikes and their political power. And so I wanted, maybe some thoughts on what are labor's prospects in the new year, and then maybe some thoughts on, again, the phrase that's circulating right now of calling for a general strike.
Yeah, I think about strikes differently from this sort of demand that sometimes appears for a general strike. It sort of bubbles up every so often, and it's a kind of aspiration, but I don't think it really has any contact with politics and the state of organizing on the ground. It's, I don't know, sort of wishful thinking by people. A desire, maybe it expresses like a desire for some radical transformation of society, given how bad things seem at the moment. But generally, it seems to me a bit frivolous because it just makes no contact with the actual state of organizing and politics on the ground. There have been a general strike entail.
What does that actually even mean? Like when someone calls for a general strike, what would that have to entail?
A general strike is usually a term for a strike by most or all the workers in a given locality. So could be a general strike of a city, could be a general strike in a state or in a country. It's rarely something you call. It's sort of something that develops out of an already existing sort of quasi-revolutionary situation, or emerges semi-organically out of a situation where there were already strikes happening. So if you think of most of the general strikes historically have been intensifications and radicalizations of strikes that came at the end of a long period of confrontation. The Seattle general strike was a radicalization, intensification of the strikes that were happening there around the shipbuilding and lumber. Whatever, there's a variety of examples that you can look at, but it isn't something you kind of just call. And it's certainly not something that's going to happen when there's been so little sort of broad-based solidaristic labor activity. That said, strikes, we have seen strikes happening, a higher level of strike activity over the last few years, at least pre-COVID, than we had seen for a long time. And the one thing that I've been thinking a lot about, especially after doing a lot of canvassing for Bernie in February and early March, and I did it in New Hampshire, and I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I did in East Boston and in some working class areas, especially Latino areas of Boston. I was really struck by how unbelievably politically disorganized this country is. There's just so much political disorganization, especially amongst the working class. And I think it it just gave me the real feel for how limited electoral mobilizing and campaigning is as a way of really organizing the working class. Not that it's wrong or right, but that it's at most mobilizing, but it isn't organizing. And I think one of the reasons to be really serious and take strike seriously is I think it's one of the ways in which the working class actually can become organized. I think historically, actually, a lot of union organizations and working class organizations have emerged out of strikes, and not just strikes for recognition, but just strikes as an experience through which workers discover their collective power. So while I'm dubious about calls for like a general strike, because I think they're kind of wishful and don't have much contact, I think there's a lot to hope for and want out of the actual practice of striking in particular sectors or in particular industries and particular workplaces, because I think it's just an indispensable activity for facing up to and dealing with the problem of just the incredible social and political disorganization of this society. So that's sort of how I would think about strikes versus the general strike kind of idea.
So I guess following from that, I have like more general question for all of you, which kind of follows, and that's, what do you see as being the biggest like challenge or even danger for the left right now? You can think about that as being the Biden era, but I don't know, another way of thinking about it might be to say the post-Bernie era, right? Like, I think we saw, you know, a kind of coalescence around the Bernie campaign, even if it was highly, you know, even if it was very contentious and, you know, some people took a while to come around. I do think that the Bernie campaign sort of presented a point of, it was something that sort of brought different factions of the left together, if however tenuously and briefly, right? So now that that's over, like, is there something about our moment right now that makes the left particularly vulnerable?
Maybe let's throw it to Harvey, because we got to bring in some more guests in a second, and we'll rotate him out in a sec. Sad to say.
Look, I mean, we've suffered serious defeats this past year.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, we have. And all I can tell you is that in the wake of defeats, the danger is left versus left. I think that's the biggest danger. And I think that I have little doubt that there are forces amongst neoliberals who would be more than happy to contribute to that development. And I think that to me, that is the biggest problem right now, is probably left on left. But it's also the case that we've got to figure out, I mean, for those of us who think of ourselves as the smarter part of the left, perhaps, I think it's a case we're really going to, I mean, by the way, everything Alex said, I want to double down. He's absolutely right. I mean, if you had asked me that question, I would have said exactly what Alex said. And it really is the case that somehow or other we have got to figure out, we've got to figure out how to include in the vast array of the podcast culture more labor voices, so that we hear them and they hear us. That's I'll leave it at that. And I know we're all supposed to evacuate in favor of the incoming cohort. So.
No worries. We appreciate it, Harvey. As always, we do have to bring on the next guest, but I wanted to wish you a happy new year. And
thank you.
We'll be talking soon.
Jen, it was a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise.
You are the co-host of the
Jacobin show,
right? Yeah, congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. And thanks for the inadvertent plug for the show, which is on every Wednesday. So
yeah, no, it's really great. And Cale, you and I will talk soon, okay?
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Julia, pleasure to meet you. Alex, great to meet David. You and I are old friends.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Great, thanks.
Take care, Harvey. Joining us now is Catherine Liu.
Woo.
Catherine.
Oh, Bernie.
Catherine, welcome.
I thought we were hanging out and getting drunk, so I'm not.
Is that a margarita?
I get on here and it's like a seminar roundtable. I just want to run away.
What are you having? You having a margarita?
I hear you.
Yeah, I have a margarita.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Catherine, I'm also wearing my Bernie shirt. Oh, wait. Hold on. A Bernie shirt.
Not that late yet, Cale. Cale's already pulling up his shirt on us.
You had the wrong shirt, Cale. It was like it's like the red brown thing, right? You're like the brown shirt, and then you're like, oh no, it's this one. It's the Nazball supremacy. Sorry, I just started drinking, so I didn't know that you guys were like having a serious conversation. Sorry.
It's really not. But on that note, Catherine. So I don't want to steal your thunder too much, but I do want to say that Catherine has a new book out about the professional managerial class, and just to let you know, we're hoping to bring you on the Jacobin show at some point to say more about it. But I wanted to shoot you a quick question now, which is why the professional managerial class? What made you decide to investigate?
I feel like I live in its bowels and I needed to speak.
Yeah.
I feel like I've done my time. I've worked for like almost 30 years in this profession, and I was writing my dissertation, and I really wanted to make sure that my family was okay. I'm serious about this. And then I thought, this is my letter of denunciation of the class that I had to be a part of to survive. I don't want to be too melodramatic, but I do feel like we need to denounce this class, and we need to understand contradiction, like in a very old school left way. And we need to understand class contradiction as the motivating engine of history, not neoliberal harmonization, not socialist, not Communist Party official harmonization. Although I do have to say that the Communist Party members that I've sent my book to are very interested in it in China. So I think it'll be translated. But I feel like we have no understanding of class or class contradiction anymore in the United States. And partially, like, that's the fault of professors like me and liberal arts people. I'm so serious, you guys. This is so scary. I talk to my students about class and they're like, what? Because even if they're like middle class, even if their parents are losing their jobs, the word cannot even be mentioned in a classroom, or in they go race, gender, class. Like, this is the thing about intersectionality, but they really don't want to talk about class. When they talk about intersectionality. And you know what our euphemism is in the PMC for elevating working class people into its ranks? It's first gen. We call our students who are first generation students, first gen, not working class students, as if there was something really horrible about that word. And so you can use all the pronouns you want. I am going to be so canceled. I don't care. It's New Year's Eve. I have the CCP behind me. So I'm going to say this. I want to bring the silly in tonight. And so there can be like any pronoun you want, but you can't call yourself working class in the institution that I teach in academia. What the F, man? Can I curse you or no? No cursing or cursing?
You can curse.
It's a curse.
I did not ask that before I cursed, so.
What are you doing? So sorry, that's just like a very like from the gut thing. I played the game, because technically I feel like I'm lumping first generation college student. Both my grandmothers were functionally illiterate, come from peasants on one side, soldier, kind of illiterate, uneducated on the other. And so my grandparents said generation. So I feel like my instincts are very much not the instincts of the PMC, but I really had to conform to it to guarantee my survival, economic survival. Because here's the thing. I could have made an honest living in Chinese restaurants. I was really good at metro D-ing. And I was like, no, I'm an immigrant daughter. I've got to go get my degree. Then I'm going to go get another degree. And then I'm going to be successful. And that's going to make my parents feel really good. But when I look back on it now, there were other ways I could have made a living. But I just felt like I was squeezed in a corner. And to all of you out there in graduate school, it's really bad right now. And they're going to tell you don't have a choice. If you want to keep your mind alive, you have to be in graduate school. there is a choice. You can walk out. I mean, it won't be easy, but I felt like I had Stockholm syndrome in my class. So this is my hate letter.
Cheers to that.
And one of my friends are
Cheers to that.
PMC people. Okay, cheers.
Yeah, you just moved that book just went to the top of my list for next year.
It's very short. It's very short.
The table of content is wonderful. I haven't actually started yet, but it's like the PMC discovers sex. The PMC
has sex. The PMC has children. The PMC reads a book.
Yeah.
Has sex is the end. One of my favorite lines, if I can just quote myself, is that the PMC is a class that tries to do ordinary things in extraordinary ways, like having sex, reading a book, having children. Try to do that now in a normal way. You can't. Yeah.
Well, people should read your book so that they know how to do all these things.
Right. How to. Yeah, how to undo. Kill the PMC within. When you meet the professional managerial class at the crossroads, kill the professional managerial
Catherine,
class.
is this book data driven?
Oh, very data driven. I did a lot of empirical research.
I only read data driven research.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah, I did a lot of surveys, like, do you recycle? Do you think you are better than other people if you recycle? That was my favorite. No, I didn't do any of that. All pure intuition, inference, induction.
We actually, we have a bunch of people waiting that I want to throw on. So I want to offer to David, Alex, and Julia any New Year's resolutions, any final parting thoughts for the Jacobin audience?
I plan to see as many people as I possibly can next year.
You mean in person?
Yep.
In person.
Me too. I'm coming to New York. I don't care. I'm bringing the California virus. I'm going to see every one of you and hug you.
We call it the New York virus. So.
The New York virus.
Oh, I'll get the New York virus to you.
Yeah, I mean, just thank you, everybody. I'm really excited for the next year. Jacobin working on this, YouTube channel this year has been a lot of fun. I'm really excited for the next year. I'm really excited to read Catherine's book too. And solidarity, everybody. Cheers to the new year.
Happy New Year.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Thank you.
New Year, Alex. Julia, any last thoughts?
Cheers.
To legalizing and taxing adult use cannabis in New York.
Ooh, okay.
Sounds good.
What's up, Matt?
All right. But if you need some, I can send some to you too. Legally.
Great intro. Gillibrand shirt. Yo,
Nando.
What's up?
Nando's skipping the line because he's got to go early, so he's getting his quick plug.
Yeah,
he's looking at his girlfriend right now.
Yeah. Well, I was Nando, I'm imagining you people, and I think she's shy. So
Nando, I'm imagining you like at a restaurant about to slice into just like a fat ass T-bone steak in a leather jacket.
I'm at the Salt Bay's restaurant.
Yeah,
the Salt Bay is doing the thing.
Okay.
So for all of our new guests, before you came on, I wanted to know from everybody if you all thought Biden was going to win in a landslide, or if you at least thought that he was going to win by much larger margins than he actually did.
Since when? Since what?
Like
since
before
what
the
point?
election. Since
Right,
when?
but like in what point of the electoral cycle? You know, like in the primary, I thought Biden was toast. I have to admit it.
Totally. No, I mean in the general election, right up until election day, did you think Biden was going to win in a landslide?
Yes.
Me too, right? Matt, you're the resident.
No, I was ride or die with Kirsten until the end. I thought she was gonna. I'm still counting on I thought we were supposed to wear the candidate, the T-shirt of the candidate that we support in the primary.
That
so
spoke most
I'm
to you.
going with I'm myself with Tammy Taylor.
Kirsten, 2024.
Oh man,
2024.
Kirsten, 2024.
Kirsten, 2024.
Gillibrand, 2024.
All right, time to get rid of Kirsten. All right, we're getting a little bit excited over here. Get a little excited over here. Yeah, we got some Beto in the house. We got some Beto in the house, baby. Yo, hey,
I say Beto for president of Venezuela. The next president of Venezuela, Beto O'Rourke, 2024.
Let's drink to that.
You're head of the National Assembly.
We gotta do a shot of tequila. Tequila.
Yeah, I have tequila.
I have a tequila margarita. Tequila
There
margarita.
you go.
For Beto, president of Venezuela.
For president of Venezuela.
All right, fuck you, Beto. All right, we're doing some striptease here. All right, we're doing it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay.
Now you guys have to drink.
Matt, where did you get those other shirts?
What?
Like, you didn't make donations.
You got him at Urban Outfitters. Duh.
Did you spend good money on them, or did you?
You guys are lucky that I didn't choose my Pete, Corey, and Amy shirts today. I just chose a selection.
Yeah, I swear to God, if you have another candidate underneath Bernie,
I pick up Bernie and it's Tom Steyer. That would be epic. Yeah.
The campaign merch during the primary season was totally wild. Like, did you guys ever look at the Warren merch? She had every demographic group you can think of and every variation of that name for Warren. So it was like Asians for Warren, AAPI for Warren, Latinx for Warren, Latinas for Warren.
Warren and Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
2020.
I thought it was like Diamondbacks for Warren, Cobras for Warren, Darters for Warren. Anyway,
Cholos for Warren in LA.
Cholos for Warren. Yeah.
Like the guys with the button, their button was up here, and they were wearing white beaters up here.
No, and they're wearing like.
We're going for Warren, okay?
White beaters. Oh my God. No, this is when I realized like I couldn't actually be a very good door-to-door person for Bernie because I would get so mad when I was in my neighborhood and people would be like, well, I don't think you can really win. I mean, these are all professors like, I'm for Warren, sorry. And then they would say, I get really mad. And then, but my favorite one was, oh, thank you very much for the information. I'm still studying the issues. And I'm like, what? You think this is a fucking exam? You're going to get an A?
What if
so mad? Like I would literally have this rage surge in my body, and then I'd have to leave. And so I'm just like my uses as a door knocker for Bernie, not good. No.
I thought you did ordinary things in extraordinary ways. Never otherwise.
Oh, right. I would have had to have like a vegan cookie for them or something. Let me eat my vegan edibles. I can calm down after you fucking fuck my brain with that studying the issues idea.
Dude, guys, I went to Iowa for 2 weeks on the CBD for Pete campaign, and we were lit. We were legit. We were like hardcore. Everyone was totally focused and totally chill at the same time. It was incredible.
Yeah, you had high hopes for
they were all doing that dance.
So you had the indica and the sativa.
Yeah.
Nando and I had the same stupid joke, and he beat me to it by half a second.
What was it?
Just hi.
Yo, when you get to my age, you'll be that quick on the draw.
Yeah, I know.
Nando, we got other people waiting. Do you have any final thoughts?
No final thoughts. Just Cale. I think we should nominate Cale 2024.
Dude, am I shooting Nando in the head on screen?
Pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matt, you're doing like a very twisted.
Oh, wrong way.
Oh, good.
Nando, I thought you were the TV guy. Come on.
I know. I forgot that it's backwards.
All right, goodbye, Hollywood. You're too beautiful for this live stream. Get out of here.
Love you guys.
Happy New Year, Nando.
Saturday. Here is.
Okay, so Matt, I have a kind of serious election question for you since you're the resident Jacobin post-election analyst. So why did so many non-white voters cast ballots for Trump this time?
Dude, you wrote about this? This was your beat, didn't?
I mean, that no, I didn't actually write. You're like trying to get out of it. No, but really, was it just the stimulus check?
But I know you are, but what am I? No, look. I mean, this is. You don't even have to have me. You could have, certified Warrenite David Shore on this show, and he would tell you the same thing, that this is part of the broader class de-alignment in the electoral system, where a large chunk of non-white working class voters, Asian, Latino, Black, are reacting to the party system in the same way as white working class voters, because the Democrats have become this party of values without interests. They've become the party of Catherine Liu's, book, and I think there's a clear kind of basically a partisan cultural divide. And to be honest, look, I mean, I have a piece that's going to come out at some point in the issue that kind of takes some of this on, but I don't even think it's like the kind of classic economics versus culture. I think it's deeper than that, because it's not so much like, oh, working class voters of all races don't care about civil rights for minorities. Of course they do. It's about the affect of, it's exactly Catherine's point. It's the affect of the PMC-ness that has now been, the Democrats have draped themselves in it. And in 2020, more than ever, coronavirus gave them the most beautiful possible opportunity to do this, game where individual behavior and partisan identity is righteousness. And we don't even care about the politics of wealth, power, interest, distribution, none of that stuff. We're just like, I wear a mask and I vote to restore the soul of America. Boom. College voters flock to that. And clearly it's atrophying the Democrat support among the working class people of different backgrounds. Now, look, that because of the history of this country, that happens at a slow rate. It's not like, we got 87% of Black voters voted for Biden, so we shouldn't overblow it. But clearly, we see where the direction that the trends are headed. Yeah.
Micah, any thoughts from you?
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. I have a pod party going on, so I hope it's not too loud in the background. I don't know if any of you watched.
I don't think you have any friends.
Okay, Matt caught me.
My friends
got
just
me.
off screen.
Exactly. I don't know if any of you actually watched or listened to the RNC, but I did, and I remembered being struck above all else by the night that I listened, just a constant stream of people of color who they were bringing out, who all of whom foregrounded that, like, Donald Trump is the least racist person in America. Like, no one in the Republican Party hates minorities. In fact, we want minorities to succeed. They were like, it was the like funhouse mirror version of the stuff that we get from the Democratic Party, but it was like a robust, in their own way, a robust anti-racist message that they were delivering to the American people who are paying attention. And when I heard that, I was just like, oh my God, like I'm sure. I mean, I remember hearing a woman who was talking, a Black woman who had been incarcerated, who was talking about how Donald Trump freed her from prison. I mean, I'm sure it was one of the small handful of people who he sprung, who had, minor drug charges or whatever. But it was incredibly effective rhetorically, and I would just remember listening to it and thinking, the Democrats don't stand a chance against this. I mean, like, I knew it. I felt at that point that they were going to be able to break apart not a majority of Black voters or Latino voters, but certainly like with a compelling, openly anti-racist rhetorical message like that, especially in the absence of any kind of class politics whatsoever on offer from the Democrats, that they were going to be able to succeed in winning some of those voters over.
Oh, so can I say something, and then you guys should bring on Amber and Vivek. In California, affirmative action was voted down, right? Prop 16 was on the ballot because this really nice Democrat lady, white lady from San Diego, put it on the ballot. The Democratic leadership was trying to massage this. California is now like plurality, minority now. Nobody wants affirmative action. Nobody wants to just get the diverse people into the elites. People want Medicare for all. People want a free UC. People probably want open admissions. We want open admissions for public universities. We want the fusion of community colleges, Cal States. We have an incredible public university system. We do not want affirmative action so that PMC leaders can be really diverse and feel really good about themselves. So
yeah, that was
this is
a
the
really
sign Democrats want. If this is the hill that they're going to die on, they're going to die on this hill. Because no working class person of color wants this.
I think it is the hill they're going to die on because
I do too.
I mean, you saw all of the Democratic Party leadership lining up behind Prop 16.
And it's like, shoot yourself now or shoot yourself later because you're the working class guy in San Gabriel Valley, Latino or Asian. He or she does not want this. Only Democratic elites want this. Even African Americans who like understand class politics, and a lot of them do because they didn't want this. There aren't enough minorities who are going to be fooled by liberal PMC diversity initiatives that basically make them feel really extraordinarily virtuous to pass this. But they're going to keep ramming this down our throats, and we're going to keep saying class. And I don't know who's going to hear us. But I'm very drunk, so I'm going to leave you guys now.
Can you just narrate the next 10 years of our life for the
Yeah, I agree.
You know what? I'm on Zoom right now. Like I have this, I'm teaching all the time. I can just do this all day long. I'm like, okay, kids, what's going on? Go categorize yourself because I don't want to see anyone go to the bathroom. Like, it'll just be like, I'm just here. I'm just connected to this machine here. Just keep feeding me questions, margaritas. I'll just
Catherine Hill is a big fan of Catherine Lewis. She's just saying
all the best Catherines on tonight's stream.
Oh, a lot of people are really mad at me in my book right now on Twitter because they're worried about the discourse. I'm like, I'm not worried about the discourse. I'm not worried about leftists on Twitter. Like, let's make each other stronger and let's try to speak out of the bubble.
Let's pour each other Tammy Taylor-sized, goblets of Sauvignon Blanc.
Oh, you know what? All of you come to California. I'm going to give you big hugs with my fresh squeezed tequila margaritas. Fresh squeezed grapefruit tequila margaritas for everyone.
Cheers.
All right. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Thank you for doing this, Jen. I'll see you soon.
Catherine.
I hope to see everyone soon. Bye, baby.
Cheers. Hate to have Catherine leave, but we're going to replace her with Amber. What's up?
Hi, Amber. What's up?
Hey, how are you?
Wait, Amber, what do we have there? We can't quite see what you're wearing there.
That's a rabbit.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
That's Amber's chicken.
Yeah, Alexa.
We're getting a lot here.
What is this?
Wait, it's a little cold, so hang on just a second.
We're waiting.
Yeah. Is there a chill? Yeah.
Amber's too drunk to put on a t-shirt.
No chill.
Okay,
we got to burn.
Listen, since we're all on YouTube, I feel like I should mention Amber and I go way back, and we actually met on Twitter, which we're not on anymore and haven't been for years. But this was before it became Matt, fuck you.
No, I'm saying fuck Twitter. That's fuck.
You don't have to admit that,
right,
Jen.
right.
You don't have to say that in front of God and the whole world right now.
I know. I'm sorry.
Keep it to
Okay.
yourself.
Well, Amber and I met at a drag show, so I think that tops.
Yeah. No, it really does. It really does. But the funny thing about Amber and I meeting on Twitter, which we're not on anymore, is this was back before it was like a political cesspool, right? Like it was just like weird jokes and stuff. Yeah. And I followed Amber because I thought she was funny. And then I think then you slid into the DMs.
I did.
And the rest is history.
I did. I'm shameless.
You slid into Jen's DMs. What did you say? What was your line?
You know what? I remember it, Amber. You were like, "Hi, are you working class? Because you're normal."
Are you from Indiana? Online lefty people, and I'm like, what is wrong with these people? And I figured it out because they're all kind of like coming from an academic approach to it or something. So they're weird. They're weird people. But sometimes there's just a nice middle class Taiwanese American girl from Idaho who.
Yeah, Amber and I are country friends. She's from Indiana. I feel like people in the live chat are getting mad at me for like always talking about being from Idaho, but it keeps coming up. So
they can fuck off.
These are called the I-states for a reason.
Right, exactly. So
also I feel like Idaho representation is really lacking.
It's low, right? Not a lot of people
Yeah.
are from Idaho. Thank you, Micah. This is
I
what
thought like 70% of Idaho would use Idahans.
Yeah, you got it.
They're Mormons, right? It's the Napoleon Dynamite.
Pretty much. Matt, you know more about Idaho than like literally any other person on the East Coast.
Yeah, it's hard too to have like a narcissism of small differences too, where you can get mad if people think you're from Iowa. Or with me, people are like, you're from Ohio. I'm like, how fucking dare you?
Yeah, exactly.
Idaho. Indiana. Never mind.
Yo, Ariella, what's up?
Cale just dipped out because I don't think he could handle it.
Yeah,
handle
oh my
this
God.
rural
Yeah,
working class talk.
Yeah, our East Coast elite dipped out.
Wait, Ariella, you're from Maine though.
Yeah, I'm from Maine. And when people hear that, they're very shocked and surprised. And I think usually they think that I grew up in like one of those, touristy, like, oh yes, we summer in Maine. But I grew up in like hard Trump country.
In my head, I decided
you are the representative of East Coast elites on this because Micah and I are from Michigan, right?
Oh, hell yeah.
Sorry, Ben. Sorry, Ben. He's from Trump, Maine. I'm from fucking dude. As I've said many times before, I am the JD Vance of the PMC suburbia. Because of Maryland. David Brooks grew up.
I'm really looking forward to your.
In the shadow of David Brooks's testicles. So
that's funny.
I'm looking forward to that.
By the way, I hung out. Jen and me and Ariella hung out at a bar and got really drunk. And I was like, "So are you from like Stephen King, Maine?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's haunted. It's terrifying."
The thing about Stephen King novels is like it's not a far cry from the reality. There are like forest dwelling serial killers who have
big dogs with rabies.
Show like a Chapo show. I was like, how many rusty tricycles are just lying around, like haunted dolls and shit?
Yep.
Like it literally looks haunted.
It's not all like bush compounds. I mean, the presidential family, not whatever happens when you Google that.
I've been to Kennebunkport.
Yeah, I was not even close to Kennebunkport. I went to a high school that was sinking because it was built on an old landfill across from a graveyard, filled with asbestos, like filled to the brim. We had a lot of trailers. It was a very religious place, even though, it was a public school, but they were like, if you don't believe in God, you're going to burn in hell.
This could be a perfect basis for a Stephen King novel too, or for some kind of horror novel.
I'm saying it's very close. And there are a lot of people in Maine who are so isolated. It's actually really prepared me for the pandemic because in Maine, you like go for, weeks and weeks not seeing people, at least in the area that I grew up. And when you finally do, they're like, so did I tell you I got a bunion on my foot, the size of Kansas? You're not going to believe it. No, sit down, dear. I'm going to take my sock off and I'm going to show
medical
you. You're like, holy shit, man.
Fucked up. We're from all the six of us are from all these crazy, weird, random, small, shitty states, and yet they're all.
How dare you?
But no,
yeah, that's true. And guess what?
We don't have any Confederates on this call,
the
right?
Confederacy surrendered to a general from Maine.
Wait, who?
I don't know his name. We didn't learn about him. We weren't allowed to speak it in high school. I actually did grow up in a town with a lot of Confederate flags. I'm sure one of our commenters will know their name. I got my husband photos of Charleston after it was razed by the Union Army. And there's like a group of little black kids in like Union Army jackets sitting in one of the stockades where they used to auction the slaves. And he's like, you really know me so well because last time I was in Charleston, I got in a fist fight with these guys defending the daughters of the Confederates.
Did you guys hear about that one like older black lady who joined the Daughters of the Confederacy? Because
no,
oh my God, it's the best troll. Like she's like, what? I'm a descendant. We can talk about why.
That's true.
Oh damn.
I love that move. They let her
take
in,
over it en masse.
They like, because most of these old biddies are just like, I'm just really interested in history. So like, there were a few dissenting voices, but there were definitely like people who were like, oh yeah, this is a more complete view of history. And it's like, that's kind of cute.
This is like a rank and file strategy on the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Yeah, we could start to flip that.
Yeah,
That's a good place to organize.
Someone in the chat says Joshua Chamberlain was the general.
Oh, thanks.
See, you're right. Someone
Thanks,
knew.
chat guys. I gotta brush up on my my main history. I'm sorry.
It's only my like paid employment. I
right.
My town that I went to elementary school in was a big like underground railroad hub. So a lot of the houses on the historic registry would have like a plaque. And one of my friends, Tiffany Cooksey, lived in one of these houses, and there was like a false wall in her.
Oh, Amber, you froze right at false wall.
We're on the
because
edge of our
they
seat
still
here.
don't let you. They still don't let you talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's still
They shut the
underground.
feed down. Yeah, my husband grew up in a house like that in upstate New York, also a part of the Underground Railroad. I think there's a lot of them around here. Do you guys feel like your weird rural upbringings shaped your politics?
Well, I grew up in a small town, in like a small city in Michigan, a former like UAW stronghold. So just put some respect on Muskegon.
Wait, where,
Michigan.
Micah? Where?
Muskegon, Michigan, which is on the west coast of Michigan.
Wait, and Ben, where do you grow up?
I actually grew up in relatively cosmopolitan Lansing, Michigan, but I have been to Muskegon, and I guess you could generously describe that as sort of a city.
No, it's 100% a city. People on the stream, please chime in on the comments if you have been to Muskegon, Michigan, and you've had a good ass time on the lake. You've been downtown. You had some good food. Muskegon is a nice city.
No, I mean there are some nice bars and restaurants by the lake, but I'm just saying
You guys don't know what flame war you're about to start on Twitter because this is going to explode.
It would be way more interesting than the usual shit I get sucked into. So yeah, let's bring it on. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean it used to be much more of a city, right? Like there was actually a CPUSA newspaper there in the 30s.
Yeah, yeah, like active civil rights movement in the 60s. I mean, all kinds of stuff because it was a hub of not like auto factories like in Detroit, but like auto parts production. Anyway, I don't know why the fuck we're talking about it. Yes, and Muskegon is good.
Did it shape your politics?
It's true. Yeah. What did you say? Did it shape my politics? Well,
yeah.
Not really. I mean, my family's from Cincinnati, Ohio. My dad's a pastor, but my mom was a teachers unionist.
Yeah, fun thing by the way about this. I only found out this summer that Micah and I both went to the same random small college in Grand Rapids.
It's true, and briefly had the same advisor in the philosophy department of Aquinas College.
Sorry, I'm jumping in here because this Michigan shit is putting me to sleep. Can I hand the baton over to Chris?
Wow, you really are the East Coast elite. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, welcome, Christy and Lee. Happy New Year's, guys.
Way happy New Year's. Yeah, I was just getting on Matt for calling Maryland weird or including Maryland in the weird. I mean, not your part of Maryland. I think my part of Maryland's weird. But I grew up in kind of a fishing town in Maryland that
you belong with the rest of these people. I belong with the freaks and outlaws that should be sort of I don't know, deposited in some subterranean location along with Fairfield, Connecticut and Westchester, New York and Arlington, Virginia and North Bethesda, Maryland. We should all be, I don't know, like put out on an island somewhere in the deep Pacific, and the rest of you guys should take control.
Well, the question,
There you have it.
the question is, are you a traitor to your class, Matt, or are you actually just the fulfillment of what you were supposed to be?
I'm trying for the former, but I'm almost certainly the latter.
You get tenure at Princeton, I think that's it. Doesn't matter what your politics are.
Yeah.
Matt's gonna be running for, he's gonna be doing the Elizabeth Warren move soon.
I will say that that when I lived in Central New Jersey, and I used to go to Central New Jersey DSA meetings in Princeton sometimes, and every time I was on that campus, usually I'm relatively moderate about this. I mean, obviously, I want to nationalize Ivy universities, and Harvard should be UMass Cambridge, Princeton should be Rutgers Princeton, all that. But generally, that's my position. But I kind of, every time I was on that Princeton campus, I kind of thought, it's I don't know if we can even nationalize this. I think Princeton might just have to go.
Uh-oh.
just burn it down, salt it.
Dude,
go there again. Because it's so obvious literally every time you're on that campus. That's this is designed to keep all of us out, right? They have everything about this place is designed to, even the way it's physically laid out, it's clearly so it's going to be hard for people who don't know it well to get around, because they don't want poor people there.
We'll know the revolution has happened when they literally throw me out of the third floor window at Dickinson Hall, the fake Gothic castle where I work. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna zip. I gotta go. I love you all.
Matt, a pleasure as always. Happy New Year.
Happy New
Bye,
Year.
everyone.
Happy New Year.
I love this strange family. Bye. Maryland out.
Bye. Amber's back.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys, I guess I should get something to bring this into the frame.
Wait, who? Oh, shit.
I don't have a shirt.
This is 2016, by the way.
Nice.
For the real head.
The best thing.
Vintage.
Oh, yeah. Wait, hold up that mug a little closer. I didn't see it. Oh, hell yeah.
2016.
Highlighter mug.
Yeah.
Oh, gee, yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
I had to move to be closer to the thing, but you get to look at my cool detachment of red women.
Oh, cool.
Communist ballet. Crazy communist ballet. So there you go. I've got a backdrop now.
On the Bernie Sanders note, I just want to raise a glass to our Bernie Sanders. Even he did run in 2020, of course, even though it didn't turn out the way we wanted. I'm really proud of him and proud of the campaign, and I'm glad it happened. So here, he's holding it down on the Senate floor right now, trying to get us $2,000. So here's to you, Bernard.
Greatest American who's ever lived.
And a lot of work to get us $2,000.
Cale, you say that as a joke, but I really
that was
believe
not a joke.
No,
it's
like Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, Eugene Debs.
Literally the greatest American. He's top 5 for sure.
Yeah,
he was the man of his time. No one did more in that moment. Literally.
The left has been defeated for 40, 50, 60 years. I don't count the new left. There has been no left in this country for so long, and Bernard comes out of the ashes and resurrects us. We owe him
through
everything.
sheer force of will, just through being the most uniquely stubborn personality who yet manages to work his way through these bizarre Byzantine undemocratic institutions that are designed to destroy people like him. Well, it's a fucking miracle. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened in American politics.
Yeah, he snuck in through the back door for sure. It's so weird too because he was such a sleeper, and it's
And people say oh, well, Bernie, he could only do it because he was in Vermont. I'm like, yes, that's the fucking genius of the thing. Yeah. It's because he stuck in the back door. He knew that the whole thing was designed to prevent people like him from rising to prominence and be able to run as an actual credible presidential candidate. And he did it. That is a feather in his cap. That doesn't mean it's some kind of weird historical anomaly we should write off. It's no, that's because he's just genius enough to make it work that way.
Micah, you're all hopped up on schnapps. But
it's New Year's.
I'm going to be doing my anti-Scandinavian bit for the rest of the broadcast. The other thing is that a friend of mine pointed out he was watching. I think it was White Christmas, the old musical, in it, and it's set in Vermont, and the joke is that this is actually considered the most conservative state. And it was really conservative. I think people think of it as, lesbian New Hampshire. In many ways it is. But, like, it's not as if Vermont was some sort of, like, bastion of progressivism. He fucking went around and talked to people. And a lot of those people are indistinguishable from Vermonters. God knows we all love, like, the sort of progressive people that moved out of the cities and went to live their bucolic fantasies, and look, I love the Indigo Girls. I do love Vermont, but it's not like there's nothing. It's not like he found this utopia of progressivism. He fucking talked to people.
No, we have to build it ourselves. We absolutely have to build it ourselves. I mean, this is one of the lessons from the discourse around the Green New Deal, is that we have to absolutely go out and speak to ordinary working people from the ground up. We have to go and speak to trade unions. One of the challenges that we face with I think it's a wonderful concept, the idea of economic planning, industrial policy, mass infrastructure build out. This should, it should obviously be something that ordinary working people are all over. Why did we not succeed on that? Not just in the United States, but around the world, in terms of our conversation around that. In the UK with Jeremy Corbyn, his version of it was the Green Industrial Policy.
Although they switched to saying the Green New Deal, which is very weird.
We did it. We built it from the PMC up instead of from working class people up.
Yep.
In the one place in the United States where there weren't protests from trade unions, particularly within the building trades, which actually totally embraced the Green New Deal, it was in Maine. It was absolutely fascinating. One of the really crucial things there was that the organizers around it, rather than coming forward first up with their own proposals and then going and speaking to working people, they went to the working people first. They went to the trade unions, and what did the trade unions, the building trades, et cetera, say? They said, you know what, a really crucial aspect of this is apprenticeships. We need this in this. And then they kicked off. And this is the lesson that we have to have for everything that we do, whether we're talking about the Green New Deal or anything else, is, yes, there are brain workers, there's intellectuals, blah, 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 blah. We have a role to play, absolutely. But if we fucking start from our own little Twitter bubbles, we're not merely is that just like wrong from a class perspective, it's just we're assuming that we know everything, as opposed to the very idea, the deep basic heart of socialism, which is that the world is full of knowledge. The working people have so much more knowledge than the top of society. And the bosses don't think the rest of us have any knowledge. We know that everybody does.
Yeah.
We need to, and the replication of that with so much of what we do on the left at the moment is we just aren't even speaking to people. We are replicating what the bosses do every single day, which is we say what we think is best for everybody else.
Yeah.
Here, Lee, you're not drunk enough for the stream yet.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing about the campaigns in Maine, because they talk to working people who have a vested interest in the policies because it protects their livelihood. It's not some abstraction. It's not this house believes in science and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I need to protect the industry that has enabled my grandfather and my father and me 100%. And my family to live. Maine has some really militant, badass working class people. I remember when I was in high school, there was a proposition, I think, to privatize water off the coast of these, tourist, like elite tourist towns, like, the Bush's compound. And the fishermen got all the rotten fish that they could get. They got up on these little tripods that they built, camped out in people's yards, and they just hurled like rotten fish.
So cool. And
it worked.
I like to think that is, that's the physical manifestation of what I hope to aspire to do in my idiot podcast career. Metaphorically throw rotten fish.
At the rich.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, this has worked. Maine has a problem with Poland Spring, which is owned by Nestle. They have drained the water table. They also have really dangerous hiring practices for their truckers, and their workforce isn't safe. And driving in Maine is not an easy thing. Not even in terms of the weather, just in terms of the conditions of the roads and stuff. And a lot of these towns have suffered, and truck drivers have died, and they publicize this a lot in their work around water justice. But people get well water and they rely on it, and that is going away. And people are finding that their water is the quality is going down, and there are dangerous compounds in the water now. And they're organizing around this, and they're organizing with people to remove dams and to work to rebuild the natural environment, not because it's like we feel really happy about Mother Nature, but because they, rely on these things, obviously for their well-being, but also because so much of the work there is tied to the land. It's agricultural work, but it has to be sustainable. Fishermen are fighting on the front lines of climate change because they're seeing lobsters be smaller and smaller and smaller each year. They're watching the climate change so that they can't grow blueberries. There's problems with the fruit trees. So they're tied to these industries, and they're seeing the science like in real time. And yeah, we ignore that to our detriment. And I love the point that you made, Lee, because, we live in the dead labor of hundreds of millions of people. That's what our world is. Our world is not created by elites. Our world is created by working people. And everything we interact with and touch, including our language, comes from those people.
100%.
We have to respect that and uphold that and make it the crux of our politics, not because it's good for coalition building, simply, but because there's also a kind of arc of humanity, and we're honoring the knowledge that it's created.
We have to ground our analysis around whether we're talking about the pandemic or climate change or biodiversity loss or any of these sort of like more science-oriented subjects in a humanist sort of location, which is what you were just talking about. If we talk about it in the abstract, we talk about like, we have to save nature, we have to save the planet. Actually, honestly, with respect to geology, the planet is fine. It's we who are fucked. Stephen Jay Gould, the great Marxist paleontologist, he famous for saying that if we're talking about climate change or biodiversity loss, the planet is gonna be fine. It's us who are under threat.
Yeah.
Let's not. Sorry.
No. I mean, you're saying really good stuff. I hate to cut in, but my wife is gonna be mad at me if I'm not off this at least 5 minutes before midnight. So I just want to say, this has been really fun. Have a quick drink in the memory of Michael Brooks and Leo Panich and all the other people who are much better than us who are not here for this right now. And love you guys.
Love you, Ben. Ben, you're
Happy
all
New Year, Ben.
You're so good. You're so
Happy New Year. Thank you, Ben, so much.
Happy New Year. I'm signing off as well.
Yeah, me too. I gotta get out of here.
All right.
I fucking loved you.
I'm on West Coast.
With Vivek.
Oh,
thanks,
Lee.
God.
There's more to come. Tune in.
Who's leaving? Who am I kicking out?
To come too. All right.
I'm
Bye,
getting out of here
everyone.
too. Micah, Ariella, Lee, maybe.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So you can chill for a bit.
Are we trying to go to midnight, guys?
Yeah, why not?
I think we're gonna try to make it to midnight. Yeah, 5 minutes.
You're not at midnight. You have no sleep.
I'll give it a little bit longer before
You'll pretend.
super spreader event that I'm hosting.
Cool.
Yeah, is this still the afternoon where you are, Amber? Where are you?
Who knows?
Yeah, where are you?
This is where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Yeah.
Well, I was just getting a little jealous there. Matt just texted me to apologize that I left because all of the attention was going to Maine and we're talking about blueberries and lobsters, and I want to be talking about tomatoes.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on crabs or?
Oh God.
2020 thoughts on crabs.
Hey, look, it's Danny Bessner, everybody.
Danny
Bessner.
Hey.
Cody Rollins.
Hey. Oh, they
And there goes Danny
ran away,
Bessner.
yeah.
In and out.
So something that I had asked on the stream before I think any of you guys came on was, what do you think is the biggest challenge for the left in the post-Bernie era? Because I don't know, Amber, you and I talk about this a lot, right? Like the Bernie campaign was in a way a kind of like disciplining force, even though there was never quite a like solid coherence. But like, what's next?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that we're in a position where we have to start building institutions, and yeah, I mean, like, it's hard to enforce party discipline without a party. There's no party of the working class. For my part, I'm putting all my energy behind like various sort of union elections and labor campaign for single payer health care. Because for me, I mean, the thing that people tend to say is like, oh, the labor movement is on its back. It's like, yeah. And they're
That's
like,
the problem.
labor has no power right now. I'm like, yeah. And I think the thing is, they come to this conclusion that it's like, well, then we have to do a different thing. It's like, oh, no. That's still the answer.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very hard. You're not wrong. It's just going to be difficult. And we're in many ways not even starting from scratch. I mean, we're starting from a position of defeat. And I think it's even more difficult because generationally, in the States especially, we have very little sort of memory of union militancy. But ultimately, I think that the best sort of example you can give for why sort of movementism or activism is never going to be something that can change things on its own is single payer healthcare. This is something that's insanely popular with Americans, with working class Americans. They're all fucking on board. And then there's these people in charge that aren't. So it really doesn't matter what the popular will wants if you can't, if you can't flex, can't flex on authority. I mean, I think we're doing much better in terms of like popular opinion than we were during the Obama years, where people were sort of like slowly talking themselves out of single payer healthcare. The campaigns against Obamacare, I remember they were relentless. They were amazing.
Death panels.
Yeah, they didn't just get like insane right wingers though. I mean, really reasonable people who hate their health insurance, who really believe this, were like, I do have concerns about that. I'm not gonna they were convinced. It wasn't all, death panel, Tea Party, or psychopaths. Now we are in a position where people are like, no, we can have this. That's stupid. Everyone else has it, and we're like the fucking richest country. It's just, we're in a good position with popular opinion. It's just we don't have any muscle to enforce it. And to me, I just don't see that coming from anything other than labor. You can march all you want. I mean, they'll just, take a different route. You can shut down the highway. They'll, take the back roads. Like, it literally does not matter. We have to give them an offer they can't refuse.
I don't think anything's going to change until the class moves for itself. I think that's the lesson. The working class has to move for itself. I think that's a great lesson of the last few years. That isn't to say, from some sort of anarchist perspective, that we have to wait for that. That is our role to sort of mobilize that stuff, but not in some sort of abstract red teacher sort of top-down way. What I would say just very quickly here before midnight is the priority right now overwhelmingly is the fact that we are fucking behind the eight ball with respect to rollout of vaccines. I just had a piece in Jacobin around this. It is crazy that the free market is left to its own devices. We have to have this massive mobilization to enforce rational rollout, which is non-market based. We can do this. We don't have to wait for a revolution for this. We don't have to wait for we can be fighting for this right now. It is it is the most essential thing that everybody should be fighting for. In fact, if anything, I would say that I can't understand why we don't have a movement at the moment that is as militant around pandemics, around COVID. I know we're all like stuck in our Zoom bubbles or whatever, but there are things that we can do. I don't know why we don't have a movement as militant around this shit as we have had over the last 10, 15 years around climate change. This is existential shit. Let's get on it.
Right.
That's the number one thing I would say. Get out there, January 1st, get on your bicycles and fight for a socially just, efficient, rational rollout of the vaccine.
I think for us East Coasters, it is January 1st. So Happy New Year,
Oh,
everyone.
shit.
Happy New Year.
Get on your bike.
Yeah, get on your bike.
Yeah, I don't know. I gotta say, I think the PMC kind of progressives got a real reality check this year. I mean, Biden got in by the fucking skin of his caps. Like, it was, I mean, he should have done much better.
Yeah.
I said from the beginning that, like, nope, I'm not discounting Biden. People are like, what are you talking about? He's the rightmost, Democrat. He doesn't, his main thing is the Obama halo, and people were miserable under that. I'm like, yeah, that's true. But the main sort of disciplining, or the main sort of power of the Democratic Party is to discipline working people into wanting less. And honestly, they're very good at it. Mm-hmm. They're very good at it. And so we have to be better. I mean, like, I gotta say, I'm happier to be a socialist under Biden than I am under Trump, because everyone went fucking insane. You just can't talk to these people. And it's much easier to critique progressives when they are in power enough to fail you.
Well, this is what you said, Amber, back in 2016. Why you wanted Hillary to win wasn't because you supported Hillary. It's because you wanted to have this capacity for us as socialists, as progressives, to critique bullshit, warmongering, Wall Street.
Look at what she's doing.
HQ.
Look, she's in charge and she's fucking it up. What did I tell you? Yeah, like that kind of thing. And I mean, this is a thing that happened with, the Iraq War really threw stuff on her. When I was working for DSA, we had these lists from The Nation magazine that we would use to fundraise, and they became useless after the Iraq War because The Nation stopped being a left magazine and started being an anti-Bush magazine.
Yeah.
And it really does move the goalposts. And I'm frankly, I'm not going to say I'm delighted. I would much rather have a Bernie Sanders presidency, but Jesus Christ, it'll be nice to be like, this is what he's doing.
Yep. Line in the sand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think Adolph Reed also makes the point that NLRB appointees under Biden will be like marginally less bad than under Trump, and that's nothing to sneeze at, you know?
Oh, no, absolutely.
That's
yeah.
Oh, fuck. I would much rather have a competent neoliberal than an incompetent neoliberal with respect to the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not. That's really
I
not.
think administration is a real thing, and that's one of the things that I think people sort of like lose. The technocratic aspect of sort of neoliberalism and that kind of fetish for like end of history technocracy kind of gives people the impression that, like, because they know, and it's true, they're like, no, we need a competent person. It's like, oh, come on. Anyway, but actually, competency is kind of
good.
Our bar has just fallen so low.
Sitting on it way too much.
Christy, what did you say? The bar has fallen so low?
Yeah. You said our bar has fallen so low.
Yeah.
It really does make a difference these days.
But hey, new year, I'm feeling good.
Any resolutions? Anything we're gonna change in the new year?
I've kept every resolution I've ever made.
What?
You don't want to mess up. You don't want to mess with the record.
I've had the resolution like the last 2 years of not buying any new books until I've read all the ones that are like
no.
halfway, partially read.
No.
Lee, how did that work out?
No.
I did try to finish all the reading.
Working out and, reading this and doing that. And like, I've kept every single one. So I'm very careful about what I make because I am my own boss in the worst way.
Girl boss.
I will. Yeah, I'm my own girl boss. I'm my own man. And in true Protestant, like work ethic, obsessive kind of sense, like if I didn't meet those standards, oh God, it would be devastating. I would have
You might be laid off.
Right. One before midnight, but also it has to be one I can actually adhere to because I think I said pretty decent ones.
Well, I may be an atheist, but I was raised Anglican, so I've got that. I mean, they're basically Catholic without the Pope, so I'm free to do whatever I want, basically.
Yeah, I'm so interested in Anglicanism. Like that's basically the crux of it, right? Like you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. It's
like,
it's not bad. We don't even bother about. Well, I say we. I'm an atheist now. I've been an atheist since I was a teenager.
It does not matter. It does not matter. Those values
gay marriage,
your entire life.
Oh shit!
You have a dog?
No, my boyfriend has a dog.
Oh. Yeah.
She's very cute. This is Sheriff, but I'm neglecting my guests.
I was going to say I'm in the middle of a Marx Brothers movie.
All Marxes are good Marxes.
Good Marx.
So we were supposed to we had the audience play a drinking game tonight, and one of the items was if anybody mentions Marx, as in Carl, and nobody did, but you mentioned the Marx Brothers.
You just said. Yeah,
so I feel
Marx.
like everybody should drink.
The old man, the old mole.
All Marxes are good Marxists.
Yeah.
Including the 1980s pop singer Richard Marx.
Oh no.
I knew only people would get that reference.
Well, because I'm ancient, I'm a grandfather on the left. I was around for the 1999 Seattle WTO demonstrations.
In my head, he's Canadian.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where it was a Canadian connection. Sorry, I'm stereotyping your people.
My people.
Microaggression against Canadians.
Fuck. Well, we're canceled. We're always canceled. I'm always described in the media, to the extent that I have any, whatever, as either American or British. I'm Canadian. It's Canadian erasure, man.
Erasure.
The most problematic.
I've said this many times. My favorite writer, essayist of all time, the greatest New Yorker of all time, David Rakoff, was actually Canadian, and he was insistent that people remembered that he was Canadian. But he would say that he's like, I'm politely insistent.
Well, yeah, we are Canadians. We are famous. We are so polite, and we make sure that everybody knows how polite we are.
Yeah.
Insistently polite seems correct. Yeah.
All right, I gotta hit this party.
Yeah.
Love you, Amber. Miss you so much.
Amber.
Miss you guys.
Bye.
And,
yeah.
Once the plague's over, I'm fucking going to New York.
You should come to Los Angeles too.
Yeah.
Oh no.
But also New York.
This will be our cheers. Bye.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye, Amber.
Happy New Year.
And then there was 4 of us, and I'm still pinging a couple people, but I think we might be at the end of this. So maybe
we made it to the East Coast 2021.
Right.
I'm
it's
2 hours
still the
behind.
horrible year of the rat out here on the West Coast for me.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh wait, Lee, where are you?
I'm in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada.
Ah, yes.
Excuse me, there's no horrible year of the rat. 2020 might be like it might not be our finest year, but it sucks that Amber just left because Amber and I are both year of the rat, and we would be going to bat for the rat right now. But
Nobody needs to do that. Nobody needs to do that right now.
It's maybe not our finest showing historically, but
COVID, not your finest showing.
As Jessica LaBambolero would say, "Get out of here."
Christy, what are you doing in 2021?
Jessica LaBambalera impressions.
You're
Apparently.
doing Jessica LaBambalera.
Bambalera, whatever her name was. Yeah.
My favorite thing about her is that she, as a friend of mine described it, sounded like she was trying to remember what Rosie Perez sounded like in a movie she saw 20 years ago.
That's pretty good.
I really admire like a grift where you fake an accent for an extended period of time for like at home, right? Like there's no way she was using that accent just at school and like not at home, right?
Who might we be talking about for the moment?
You know, it's more common than you know as a psychotherapist. Yeah.
Lee, you don't remember this academic who was outed herself earlier this year as pretending to be Afro-Latina when she was actually just a white woman from like Kansas.
Oh, there's so many of them.
I know. Well,
days.
it's true. It's true. There were actually quite a few. So
of academia is, I turn off now. It's like, well, yeah, of course.
There's a really good video.
No, in all seriousness, I mean, we know the reason why this is happening is that within a particular circle, there is this inversion where a set of oppressions are actually a way that you can have not power per se, but certainly a sort of chip that you can play.
Yeah, like some kind of like cultural capital or something.
Exactly, absolutely. Yeah. We shouldn't actually be that surprised. Back in the 1920s, if you read any of what's really, really, really amazing to read is Victor Serge's Memoirs of a Revolutionary. He was an anarchist who joined the Bolsheviks, despite the fact being an anarchist. He thought that in 1917, that's where the fight was. We got to defend them. But he was always quite critical of Lenin and the Bolsheviks. And what's beautiful about this book is that you could read so many books about the political or economic history of the Soviet Union. This gives you the social history of what it felt like when so many of your friends or even family members told you, lied to the Cheka about your supposed anti-working class ideology or perspective or background or whatever. And this happens over and over and over again on the left. And we should be very, very aware that there's just something bad about group dynamics. Group psychology came after Marxism. And for some reason, we have not incorporated psychology as much into our perspective as I think we should. Yeah, absolutely, 100%, as much as we should be doing, because there's a lot of explanatory power in that as to why this is happening. It happened with the Chinese Cultural Revolution. It happened with Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. It happened with the Red Army faction in Germany. It happened with the Red Brigades in Italy. It happened within the American Communist Party in the 1950s. Over and over and over again, this happens, and we have to develop a sort of like an analysis rooted in psychology to explain this, so that whenever it happens again, we can say, "Oh, we know what's going on here. We see this.
I mean, it's really
this is bad. We have a set of weapons and shields to be able to battle it."
I don't think you know that I'm a practicing psychoanalyst and an organizer, mostly for single-payer healthcare. But I ended up as an organizer going into school and studying psychoanalysis precisely because I was purged from a sectarian group, sectarian group, and ended up being drawn into an interest in group psychology, specifically like Freudian and Bion, Wilfred Bion. Has extensive work that just explained my experience as part of a small group, group dynamics. Human beings are exquisitely, difficult creatures, and in groups especially. And even when you have the lessons of group dynamics, of irrational tendencies taking over in groups, and preventing them from succeeding in their collective goals, it still doesn't stop you from falling into the same pitfalls. I think it is really difficult if we believe in democracy. It presents really really, really difficult questions, I think the best that we can do is to keep our politics like extremely explicit and clear, and not do backroom organizing, a lot of backroom contracts and deals that we're making. I think we have to be extremely upfront that our demands are material, they're concrete, they're things that would change people's everyday lives, because that's what appeals to the masses of people who don't yet identify as democratic socialists. That's what politics has not been for the majority of people, Americans in particular. We don't have politics that appeal to anyone's concrete interests. I spent most of my holiday just getting my family to stop talking about cultural issues as if they were political issues, and just like you can't really refuse the conversation, but you have to say, what is happening in your day-to-day life that you care about, and can we politicize that? Is that something that has a political cause behind it that you can either change at the voting booth, in your workplace, in some issue-based campaign work? I think that is like our challenge. The group dynamics take over as soon as you kind of have any kind of moralizing cultural thing take precedence over people's shared material self-interest and collective interest. And that's where I think you can have all of the insight into the unconscious, into group dynamics in the world, but we have to just stay extremely explicit and on the surface about what it is that we're fighting for, and we're fighting together in order to overcome that. That's my take.
I agree 100%. The only thing I was suggesting is that I do think that in terms of our own movement and groups, that it wouldn't be bad if we actually talked about it a little bit more, so that we are armed a little bit in terms of knowledge about this stuff. We read so much stuff around Marxist economics, history of the left, working class struggles. That's all really, really important.
Yeah.
I'd love for us to, I don't know, just maybe once a year, let's sit down and have a conversation about group dynamics and the lessons from psychology about this stuff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, your suggestion was surge, though, right? So it was historical. This has happened before, and it will happen again. I think. Yeah, somewhere between group dynamic theory and just like the history of the left's own self defeat.
There's a book waiting to be written on this stuff by a Marxist psychologist.
If you know of any.
Yeah, if only we knew someone.
No, that's not a joke. I would love for somebody to go through that, to really dig deep from obviously historical, but also with a deep psychological knowledge to scientific knowledge, psychological scientific background, to really go through. And so look at all these things that happened with the Bolshevik Party. Then let's look at what happened with the Khmer Rouge. Let's look at what happened with the Chinese Cultural Revolution, the Red Army Factory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I would love, that's a book that I think has to be written.
Yeah, I agree. We'll see. Damage Magazine has is the
Damage. Yeah. I love.
I was just about to ask if either of you had anything you wanted to plug before we sign off for 2021. Yes, everybody read Damage Mag. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Lee, do you have a new book coming out, or?
Well,
can you talk about it?
You should read his latest Jacobin
piece. I mean, my God, this year's been so crazy. I was supposed to be working on a book around COVID and economic planning, and that's it's been very difficult to put that together. We'll see. I've still got some ideas around that. I'll keep that on the down low for the moment. And then
be continued.
To be continued. Yeah. I guess just my last article for Jacobin, which I worked on for about a month to put together, on the challenges with the rollout of the vaccines. Yeah. It's a great. I don't know. I don't know if it's great.
You can say it. You can say it.
Let's say it's an extensive discussion of both an explanation of how the vaccines work, the various different front of the queue vaccines work, the challenges with ultra cold supply chain, that whole like slew of different things, and how that really needs to be the next sort of front line of struggle right now. And it's so fucking important. And this is something I think we can win from Biden. Not just Biden, but here in Canada with Trudeau, with in the EU, around the world. The United States is particularly behind the 8 ball because it's much more free market oriented, unfortunately. But all sorts of public health officials, clinicians. We just had Dr. Paul Offit, who is one of the advisors to the FDA's vaccine committee, saying on CNN today, basically what we need is, we've had basically a Manhattan Project, which was like wrongly called Operation Warp Speed, but it was broadly what we needed to have done. And now we need to have exactly the same thing, a Manhattan Project for the logistics of rollout, and has to be state-led. And this is going to be, I was like, there are people on Twitter critiquing me for, you're so statist.
Damn, Lee, why do you want the state to do anything in your life?
We need to get over this. There's you know what? I'll be really fucking happy if we just have a much more leap forward in terms of like some basic social democratic shit.
Let's just not call it a forward leap forward.
No. I've had too much to drink.
You're in the Goldilocks zone. You either you're past a certain point, but you need more.
Yeah.
Sorry, Cale.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We
that
need
was
to.
Twitter sound. You can't reuse it for just.
Is this Twitter's feedback on our stream right now? Interjecting into our show? Nah. No, we need. Yes, we need to revive the public's opinion of state-led projects.
Yes,
this is, I think, one of the chief kind of objectives in kind of an abstract
serious
sense.
I would love for leftists who are just starting out at university or in grad school, if you want to study operations research, logistics, that sort of stuff, fucking go for it. We desperately fucking need you in the years to come as we build a more public sector led world. Not to say there's anything wrong with Foucault or Heidegger, although I have some issues with them. But
we can say there's something wrong.
Yeah, you can say that things are wrong with them.
I think we need a greater focus on some of that stuff. Yeah.
Socialist scientists. We need people who can count on the left.
Fuck, not just science. Like, go and study commerce. Go into business school. Seriously, go into business school. It's learn about this shit. Learn how the world actually works.
I tried. I did 2 semesters and I couldn't stick with it. This shit's so boring. I can't.
Okay, I don't know about business school, but we need socialist economists. We need socialist scientists. We need people who can count. We need socialist psychologists. There is a lot of tasks in front of us, primarily in 2021, but also in the years ahead. And we need our team to be stacked with the greatest and the best in the world.
And humanities are great too. I love the humanities, but
we got a lot of those already.
We can't only have the humanities.
Right.
I think we're okay on that.
You can humanities and then go into the labor movement. You can.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh yeah.
Join the Teamsters.
There's a lot of that. Yeah.
All right.
So I think on that note, we passed the midnight mark, so we're gonna call it a night. But it has been great having everybody on, and especially winding down with you guys. So thank you for everybody for watching.
Jen and Cale. Yeah.
Happy New Year, guys.
Yeah, happy New Year to all of you.
And a happy fucking New Year to all the frontline workers. I mean it very, very sincerely.
Yeah.
We say so many times, thanks for your service to military folks. Jesus Christ, do we ever need to say thanks for your service to the garbage workers, the healthcare workers, the grocery staff, energy system workers, the bar staff, They hold the world up on their fucking shoulders. That's, if anything, that we've learned this year. The people who are paid so little, who are paid so little attention to, they build this world.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Happy
And they always have.
21.
Yeah.
I would toast them, but I'm out of champagne.
Well, fucking more champagne, man.
No, sincerely, they built the world. They should run it. Thank you so much, Lee. I'll talk to you
Thank
soon.
you, Christy. We'll see you guys soon.
Christy, Jen, thank you for doing this behemoth of a live stream with
Cale,
us.
thank you. It was fun. To the viewers out there, I hope this was entertaining for you and that you got to drink some drinks. And we'll see you in 2021.
I do want to say before we go, 2020 has been an awful year, and there's been a lot of loss and a lot of pain, and we want to extend our sympathies to our audience. We also want to extend our sympathies to some of the comrades that we know that we lost this year, including Michael Brooks, including Leo Panitch, that the left has lost some very important voices in the last year. People that we really probably should have needed going forward, that we needed people like Michael Brooks, who brought so much kindness to the left, and people like Leo Panitch, who trying to understand our electoral moment right now is like his work is invaluable. And so I would be remiss if we didn't end by just offering a final thank you to Leo and to Michael, wherever you are in the galaxy, that we appreciate your existence. We appreciate the amount of work that you've given us, and that we only can aspire to carry on your legacies. And
your memory lives on for sure.
Yeah. And so thank you, audience. We're going to try to do our best in the new year to build, to increasingly build the intellectual political left in America. And, here's to hopefully getting some wins in the future. So thank you, Jen. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Happy New Year.
Mm-hmm.